Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Biz Talk Weekly. I'm your host, Greg Johnson. Today, we have Sarah Wieczorek from Value Care Vet Clinics. They have two locations here in the Twin Cities. Sarah, welcome to the show. And, th and,
Thanks,
th
Greg. I appreciate it.
and thank you for being here. Why don't you just give us a little introduction of you and your business?
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah. I'm the owner of ValueCare Veterinary Clinic. We have a couple locations here in the Twin Cities, one in Richfield and one in Chaska. The Chaska location was started back in 2014. So we've been in your neighborhood for a little bit of time and loving our communities. We do work heavily with rescues, but our main goal is to make vet care affordable for everyone.
Awesome. Awesome. Sarah, you mentioned two locations. You said one was in Chaska. Where's your other location?
Correct. Yep, we're in Richfield, right north of the Mall of America, right on 66th Street,
Okay. And when did that location start up?
2017.
Okay. Awesome. What, have you always been sort of in the veterinary business, or what's your particular background?
So my background is in IT and data management.
Hmm. Which is why
And
you started a
when we
vet,
opened
veterinary clinic.
when we opened the vet clinic, we just saw such a need for low cost care in the Twin Cities.
Hmm.
Um, Mission Animal Hospital, I think, and Value Care were the first couple of low cost clinics that were really working with rescues and individuals in the cities. So there was just a hole that needed to be filled over Richfield and Chaska area. But now at this point, there's quite a few other vet clinics in the area.
Sure. So you went from IT to owning a vet clinic. How did that transpire?
So I've always had a passion for animals, which I think probably a lot of people can tell the same type of story. But once you really get into the rescue world and to, struggling, I guess, yourself to try to make ends meet and then try to afford vet care on top of that, you really just see the
Mhm.
need there for that.
Mhm. Yeah, that is so true because I mean the pet industry has just boomed over the last, 10, 20 years. And that is one of the real challenges is the cost of owning a pet can be, kind of
It's astronomical.
astronomical. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true, though.
How did you see how did you connect the dots from I'm this IT professional, I love animals, and we have this need for, lower cost vet care. Like how did that transpire?
So when we opened the clinic, it was something that my partner and I both had a passion for, and he'd worked in the veterinary field.
Okay.
And so it was something that was an easy stepping stone for him. And as soon as we opened the practice, it grew so quickly that I stepped in to manage and take care of everything.
Okay. Okay. So you didn't buy a business, you started a business from scratch, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, we looked at several veterinary clinics to purchase. And at the time, there weren't an awful lot for sale. And I mean, generally, practices for sale are few and far between. And a lot of them end up in corporate hands instead of private sector.
Um,
So we started looking at just like the cost of purchasing versus starting up from scratch. And it just made a lot more sense to find a building and figure out all the intricacies of vendors and products and how we were going to run the business from scratch. So that was quite the adventure.
I can imagine, like what was going through your mind? Because here you'd never been a business owner before, never.
Right.
I take it you'd never been. You probably didn't consider yourself an entrepreneur, and now here you
Um,
are owning a business. Just
right.
talk about
Yeah,
that.
no. Well, I grew up with my dad and he's a farmer, but he was buying elevators and doing fertilizer business. So he was constantly talking about getting into different types of entrepreneurship. And so it definitely, like being around him and seeing his passion for different, it was a completely different industry, but seeing his passion for growing a business from scratch definitely gave me the boost that I needed to jump in. And I guess nothing really scares me, Greg. So I didn't give it too much of a thought and I just went for it.
That's awesome. Because I think there are a lot of folks who they hesitate to take that. They get right up to the edge of the water, right? And then, boy,
Right.
it's easy to get cold feet. And that's not being critical of anyone who makes that decision. It's just, it's a big decision. And it's not for everybody. Like, not
Correct.
everybody should own their own business. It's just, it takes a certain individual to do that. Did you grow up in Minnesota then? You said you're on a farm?
Nope, I grew up in right around Mitchell, South Dakota.
Okay, okay.
So kind of
But
central South Dakota.
it's interesting that you talk about your dad as a farmer because I don't think people think about farmers being entrepreneurs, but they absolutely are because
Yes.
they're running their own business. I mean, there's nobody telling them what crop to grow or how many cattle to have or how many cows to milk. I mean, it's kind of like the original entrepreneur business, I think. And certainly it's a lot different today than it was, probably even a few years back. But I can see where you got your entrepreneurial spirit if you grew up in a farm family. So, um, when you think about your business right now, so you've had it for, the Chaska location a little over 10 years. I mean, how do you look at it? And when you think about success and how you define success, how would you look at your business and say, if you said, hey, we've been successful and here's why, or hey, we haven't been successful and here's why.
I would say success for me is two parts. And that is the first is obviously our team. And if they're happy and enjoying their jobs, because that was one of the first things that I set out to do, because I'd worked for amazing companies here in Minnesota and in South Dakota. And just seeing the way that they treated their people. And I mean, I think we all have one job that was terrible, and we know we don't want to do those type of things to our people, right? But for the most part, I had amazing positions before Value Care. And seeing how they treated me, I knew exactly what type of environment I wanted for our teams. And so that is something that we work on day in and day out, is to try to make sure that we have teams that are friends in the clinic, friends outside of the clinic, and they really like enjoy the environment that we're providing. And that's not easy, Greg. I would say that's probably one of our biggest challenges, but it's also providing jobs that people enjoy and a team that people want to be a part of is like that's my number one. So if I see our teams happy, and as a business owner, you can walk in and you feel if people are happy or not, like the minute you walk in the door. And that's kind of funny, but it in over a decade of working, you can feel it. So I love going to both of the clinics, and there's so much good energy at both of the clinics. I love that. And then the second one is when I'm walking through the break room and I see cookies or donuts or cake sitting there from clients that really appreciated our team
Wow.
going above and beyond. I consider that our success too, in the thank you notes. So to me, it's more of our community involvement and having people really appreciate what we are doing for our community and the where we fit in to make sure that they're not only getting amazing vet care, but they have compassionate people that they're working with and they're enjoying the time that they're at the clinic. So that's huge for us.
There's so much you just said in that answer. And I think the first thing you said was you talked about how you define success. And I think that's so important for business owners to know that they get to define what success is, and it's really important
Yeah.
to have your own individual measuring stick. And I don't say that as a way of rationalizing, how a business is performing, because obviously businesses are in business to make money. And if you're not making money, you're not going to be in business for very long. But that wasn't your answer. Your answer was success is defined, by you in your terms. And two things you just popped off the screen, I think, is one is employee engagement, because that's just so
Yeah.
critical in this day and age. We have a lot of employees walking around businesses that are just not engaged, and it's not their fault. It's leadership. And
Yeah.
when you can get employees engaged, it just makes the world of difference in terms of, I'm sure, how you feel about your business and how your clients feel about your business. And it's clear when you're getting cookies and cake from clients.
Yep.
That doesn't happen in a lot of industries. You know? Now,
Yeah, that's
now,
true.
now, people take their animals very seriously, and when they see good service being performed for their animals, whether it's boarding or vet or pet walking or that sort of thing, but that's an awesome testimony to the success of your business. I'm sure you feel
Yeah, like you mentioned,
that.
Greg. I mean,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
everybody always has to watch the bottom dollar just to make sure that we're making ends meet
Right.
and that we're able to pay bills and everything like that. That is obviously important to everybody. But I think that's a really good thing to note is that everybody has their own measuring stick of what is important to them
Yeah,
that does make their business feel like a success to them.
absolutely. Absolutely. You've been in business a little over 10 years at the one location, and then you started the Richfield location. Can you talk about a time where you kind of faced some, significant challenge or hurdle, and sort of how what the situation was? And you don't have to go into a lot of detail, but just what the situation was and how you overcame a challenge or a hurdle.
Oh boy, it's funny because I think of like a dozen different things over the course of the years, right?
Maybe just yesterday, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's true is that, and you never know what you're going to wake up to, too.
Right,
And when you own a business, you never know what you're going to wake up to and what could happen because it could be absolutely anything. But
right.
we had a point at the clinic where one of our doctors took our entire team and went to a different veterinary clinic.
Oh, wow.
And that it was hard.
I'm
So
sure.
we sat there with very little staff left, but we took it as an opportunity. And I think that's something that I can definitely say about the entire management team at Value Care is there's a lot of hard things that happen um, just at the clinic and
Mhm.
for, sadness with people seeing their pets hurting or passing away or
Sure.
euthanizing. I mean, there's a lot of hard things within the industry. Um, but we always look at things as we're going to try to grow from this. And so we took it as a real positive where it's like, okay, now we get the chance to build our team exactly as we want it. And we're going to be very careful and cautious and make sure that we pick the right people for our team this time around. And so that's that by looking at from a positive aspect, it made it fun, challenging, obviously, but
Right.
we ended up with a phenomenal team. So, and we ended up with a team 3 times the size we had when they left. And so we just really grew. It was unreal.
That's
And it's
incredible.
funny, I look back through every challenge we've had that has been a significant challenge, and we always end up better than we were prior to that. So we try to look at every challenge as a positive.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, I think that's so critical when you can look at things through, sort of I'll say rose-colored glasses, but I don't mean that in a way of being not of being unrealistic, but of just
Right.
saying like, yeah, this is a challenge, but if we do the right things, and we work through this right, we're going to come out stronger because of it.
Yeah.
They always say leaders, they don't learn from their successes, they learn from, challenges and failures. Not that that was a failure in any way, but when we're kind of pushed out of our comfort zone, that's when we really
Right.
find out kind of our own character and the character of the people around us. Ooh, that's a really that's
Absolutely.
a really good story. Um, what does it look like to have, going about and building your team within your organization? The fact now you've gone to two locations, I mean, that had to stretch your team a little bit and probably forced you to bring on additional resources. What are some of the things you think about or that come across your mind when you're looking at adding to the team, growing the team? What are the things that come to mind for you?
So we're always really conservative when we hire, because like we talked about, the team health and happiness is our number one goal. So to do that, unfortunately, and I think every business owner probably knows, is that once you have one bad apple, it ruins the bunch, and that's a pretty cliche, but it's very true.
Yeah,
And so we're very cautious when we do hire, and we tend to grow slowly. Um, and so we typically hire one or two people at a time is all.
yeah, yeah. And when you do that, I mean, are there certain aspects or qualities within those individuals you're looking at, or how do you know somebody, you said it, like you need the right fit. Like, how do you know somebody's going to be, and I know there's no guarantees, right? But how do you get a good feel that, oh yeah, this individual is going to work out really well with our team?
We do, when we're interviewing, we try to do team interviews. So it'll usually be two of us, potentially three of us interviewing someone at a time. And we won't just sit down and like talk through your resume. Tell me about what you did here. Tell me about what happened there. We really want to have a conversation with people and see, are we enjoying talking to them? Because if we're enjoying them, our clients are going to enjoy them, our staff is going to enjoy them. We're going to be able to add to our team with somebody that we want to be around.
Mhm.
And honestly, that's who wins the interview and who gets the job.
Yeah, I think that's something sometimes that people miss is the fit within an organization as opposed to the skills somebody's bringing. Yes, you do need to have the right skill set, especially you're in a pretty technical business. I mean, like I couldn't come and get a job as a vet tech. I mean, there's just no way I couldn't do it, right? So you got to have the skill set, but that softer side, the fit within the organization, I think is where, like you said, when it's a bad apple, it's probably a bad apple, not because they don't know how to do their job. They're a bad apple because they've got a poor attitude or they've got, a behavior that's, you know, not conducive with our other employees or with our clients. And that's the thing that creates the bad apple, not the fact that they don't know how to do their job.
Yeah, correct. And not necessarily are they a bad person. By no means do I mean that.
Right.
But you get somebody that's negative and that rubs off on everybody around them.
You know,
And that becomes challenging for everybody then.
yeah. Yeah. And you're so right, Sarah. It's not a case of like that it's a bad person. It's just not the right fit, right?
Right.
And I think when
Yes.
you see that, you know, realizing it and then taking action around it, I think just because otherwise that starts to wear off on, like you said, on other employees, and then all of a sudden there's a reason they call it a bad apple, right? Because
Yep.
now all of a sudden it starts to have its impact kind of throughout the organization. So yeah, what you probably had some thoughts in your mind when you started your business as to what this was going to look like. Now you can look back 10 or 12 years and you've been running this business. What were some things you thought about when you were first starting the business, and now you look back on it and you just say, like, wow, I didn't understand that at all, or I didn't realize how, how this was going to impact the business. What were some misconceptions maybe that you had as a brand new owner?
I think the industry as a whole is interesting because we have gone through a time where, so when we opened the business, hiring wasn't a non-issue, and then we got a few years in and we're starting to grow, and we can't find veterinarians. So
Mhm.
it ended up where schools were not producing the number of veterinarians that we needed nationwide. And so there was a shortage. And so finding veterinarians was very difficult. And so trying to fill a position where there just wasn't, you know, viable candidates or any candidates was a real stress and a real struggle. And then now we're kind of on the other side of it where because we're privately owned, we're finding it easier to find veterinarians
Really?
because there are so many veterinary clinics that are corporate owned at this point.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So would you say just generally that your environment, because you're privately held, draws more vets towards that kind of an environment versus sort
That's
of,
yeah, that's what we've been finding, I would say, in the last 2 years. So it changes, and it's all. I'm sure every industry's got their own challenge, but industry has changed so much in the past, 12 years. It's unreal.
and why do you think, why would a vet say, well, I really like the idea of working for, you know, a privately held, smaller clinic versus a corporate clinic? Like think of it from the employee standpoint. What do you think it is that they're seeing or hearing that attracts them to that?
So, as with any other doctor, when they come out of vet school, I mean, they've spent so many years, so much money to try to get their degree, right? They've
Right?
worked hard for this. So they want to practice in a manner that makes them happy. And so they can either own their own practice, or if they end up working for corporate, then they end up with quotas and this is, how we do this protocol, and you end up more in a structured environment with less freedom to practice how you want to.
Hmm.
And so when we hire veterinarians, we're very mindful of how do you want to practice and what medications would you like to have on the shelf here? What helps you feel like you're successful, right? So
Gotcha.
it's making sure that um, they're practicing in a manner that they want to too, and that's just not available in a corporate position.
So they have a lot more structure they have to follow in that corporate environment.
Right.
Is that right? Where
Right.
you're able to provide them more autonomy and more
Hmm.
ability to kind of run their own show, so to speak.
Right. Kind of decide what their schedule is going to look like and days and hours and what they're going to be doing with those hours. So, I mean, we obviously still have to financially meet our
Sure.
goal, but there's different ways to go about that to make it work for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, Sarah, because again, the one thing you didn't bring up was money, right? And I think that a lot of times, I think especially the young generation that, the ones who are graduating now they're thinking differently in terms of what they want from their job and their career. And it's not always about more money and moving up the corporate ladder and, more prestige. I'm hearing a lot more about, I want to have purpose. I want to know that my work matters and makes a difference. I want to be around people who I like, and you've talked about that quite a bit. So I think there's really been a shift going on, over the last 10 or 20 years in terms of how individuals look at work. And you certainly seem to have kind of your finger on the pulse, at least as it applies to the folks you're looking for and need to run your business.
It is interesting, and we do try to pay towards the top of the pay scale because we want to keep our people happy. But I remember the first vet that I interviewed that said to me, "I don't really care what I get paid. I want to be happy here." And so you're 100% right. The whole world has a different outlook on what success means to them too. And but again, a lot of times we're getting the people that really have a passion for rescue and really have a passion for low cost care. So there's a different type of practice for everybody
Yeah,
because there are like the glitzy, glamorous, we have more time to do what we want to do practices, which is awesome, but there is a place for everybody.
yeah,
And I always tell our team that I want them to be happy. So when they show up in the morning, I want them to be excited about work and want to come in the door. And if they start feeling like that's not the case, then we need to have a conversation about either what needs to change or what we're missing, or maybe we're just not the right fit for you because not every business is the right fit for an employee.
right, right. Well, and you talked about your specific niche is
Yeah,
really focused on this value, value pricing,
yeah,
which, has some ramifications to it, right? Good and positive, negative. I mean, there's, like you just said, there are folks out there and they're not bad people, but they might look at that and say, well, I want to work at a vet that's, considered the high end, the one that does procedures nobody else does, or, has a
right.
particular reputation, right? But when you're talking about really being a value provider, and I don't think, like you said, at least when you started the business, there weren't a lot of those types of vets out there. I'm sure your business does draw, a specific type of employee, and the fact you're able to recognize who that is, I think gives you a leg up when you're out there looking for talent.
Oh,
Well,
definitely. Yeah.
yeah. What what are some, one thing I hear from business owners a lot, Sarah, is that they sometimes find themselves where they are just tied at the hip to their business. That business starts to really consume them. And from a personal life, sometimes they really struggle. What kind of things do you try to do from a work-life balance to make sure that, you know, business doesn't become, that Sarah doesn't get, totally in wrapped up with the business, but that you have your own life outside of work.
That's a really good question, Greg. And I think that anytime you're starting a new business, you're going to be 100% wrapped up in it.
Mhm.
And I know when I started, I was working until 2 a.m. and getting back up at 5 o'clock. And, you're constantly making sure that everything's working right. And you're working ahead to try to make sure that everything's smooth for everybody else, right?
Right.
So right now, a decade out, we have excellent managers in place and they make sure that the day to day is operating the way it needs to be. So I've tried to take it from, being on the ground all of the time, making sure that I was there and helping with everything and, making overlooking everything, right? To the point that now I have two managers, one in each location that I trust wholeheartedly. They do an incredible job, and I couldn't do it without them. And so that allows me to be able to work from home on certain days and go on vacation and make sure I, do the things I want to do with my kids.
Yeah.
And I think unless you have the right team in place and you trust them and believe in them and you know that they're doing a good job, I don't know that you could get out of that cycle. You have to have excellent people.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think, and then trusting them, like you said, right?
Yes.
Because you have to let go of some things.
Hmm.
And it's not just about work-life balance, although certainly that's critical. If you're gonna have some balance in your life, you got to have good people working for you. But also in terms of the things you're able then to focus on. You know,
Hmm.
if you've got good people who are running the business day to day, it allows you, Sarah, the owner, to start thinking differently about your business. You don't have to
Yes.
worry about the schedule today or some of those day-to-day things. You can really be focused on more of the strategy, the long term. Okay, what are we gonna look like 5, 10, 15 years from now?
Right. We started, it was probably 2 or 3 years ago, where we were like, okay, we're reactive to everything. Everything hits us and we're having to react to it. And that gets old. You're exhausted in that state. And so we were like, okay, we are going to flip the switch and we are going to be proactive. We're going to think ahead. We're going to work harder for now to try to get out of that, fix everything there, and then look forward to how can we be proactive, see stuff coming down, and make sure it gets taken care of before we have a problem.
Yeah,
And so we really, and I think every business I'm sure is probably the same where you struggle back and forth between reactive and proactive. And I mean, there's problems that come up every day that you're not going to see coming. And I mean, sometimes kind of blow your mind, like, how did this even happen?
right,
But staying on the proactive side of things and making sure that that I can see the big picture and make sure that I know what our goals are and everybody knows what our goals are for the next 6 months.
right.
It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, again, I see so many business owners who like you just said, they're spending their time putting out fires.
Hmm.
And if that's all you're doing, you you are going to feel like you're running on a treadmill and you are going to feel tired because
Yeah.
that does get
Oh,
exhausting.
yeah. Yeah.
But when you can have the right people in your business who can take care of those kind of fires, and maybe they can't take care of all of them, but just imagine getting 80% of those kind of off your plate and what that can do from a running the business standpoint, the ability to work on the business as opposed to in the business. It just makes a huge difference
Yep.
is what I've seen. And clearly you've seen that as well.
Yeah. It's huge.
Sarah, we get folks watching the program who are maybe thinking about going into business for themselves. Maybe they're going to buy a business. Maybe they're going to do what you did, start a business from scratch. What kind of advice would you give somebody who's thinking about that? And maybe they're, you know, young like you and they're thinking of starting a business, or maybe they're old like me and thinking of starting a business. But how would you coach them? How would you prepare them for what they might be about to go through?
Um, so I guess I would say look around um, in your neighborhood or wherever, whichever neighborhood, and especially because the Twin Cities is so large,
Right.
there's multiple neighborhoods that you can look at putting your business in and make sure it makes sense that your business goes where it does. We put both of our businesses on main thoroughfares.
Mhm.
And so advertising is done by just our buildings there, right?
Yeah.
And then word of
Yeah.
mouth. But the half of the advertising for us, or probably more than half, is our location. It's huge. Everybody sees you and knows you're there, right? So I would say make sure that your location makes sense. Make sure that if you're, and I would look at that anytime I would look at a business. Does it make sense for me to purchase this business, or does it make sense for me to start this business from scratch?
Mhm.
And then how much passion do I have for this? Because I'm going to be living this, while I'm starting this business. Or, I mean, even taking over a business. I'm sure it takes a considerable amount of your own time to get it running the way that you want it to be.
Okay.
So make sure that you are invested, you know, in that business. And then I would say go for it because if you've gone through the steps of does this make sense financially? Is this a great location? And am I passionate about this? I think that next step is just taking that leap.
Yeah. I love that what you said about location because I feel like that's gotten lost in business with technology the way it is, and the ability for us to work remotely and do meetings like we're doing right now remotely. But when you go to the vet, it's pretty tough to go to the vet online.
Yeah.
The vet needs to see your dog, look at your dog, check your dog, your cat. Um, and location does matter. I mean, it's people don't want to, we want convenience in our lives, and folks don't want to drive all over the place to, now they probably will if they're getting good service, but
Yeah.
making it as easy to do business with someone as possible, right? And in your case, location's a big part of that. So, whether it's location or how easy it is to use our website, or how
Yes.
easy it is to interact with us, that makes a big difference in terms of how clients feel about the interaction and the experience they've had.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, I really appreciate you being on the show today. It was really fun and fascinating to hear about your story. It's a unique story, and I think it's a unique business. And I just can't thank you enough for being on here. And we really wish you luck with your business as you go forward.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Have a great day.
You too.